So we're going to let everyone in.
Welcome, everybody. We're just letting folks in.
Are you all seeing the right screen? Okay, just wanted to make sure it wasn't on the presenter side.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll have some folks coming in the next couple of minutes, but we've got such great content planned for you all today that I want to get us started. So I am Amanda. I'm the Youth Housing Initiative Director at COHHIO, and welcome to our Ohio McKinney-Vento Community of Practice on supporting transitions to adulthood for students experiencing homelessness. So you can go ahead and advance the slide. Just going to do our regular introduction. So if you could just say hi in the chat box with your name and preferred pronouns, the name of your district or ESC, your role there, and one word description of how you are doing today. So just to set the example, I'm Amanda Wilson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with COHHIO. I'm the Youth Housing Initiative Director, and I am... what am I doing? How am I doing today? I think I'm doing, I want to say fine, which is like so not descriptive, but like even keel, in the middle, feeling equanimous, if that's the right way to say that word. So I see those introductions coming in. So thank you. Got some overwhelm. Yeah, I hear that. Busy. This is a really, we respect that this is a really busy time for everyone, and we really appreciate you being here and taking the time to connect with us and check out our content today. So please keep those introductions coming, but we'll go ahead and, there's the dog. All right, she's leaving everyone. Go through our Zoom logistics for today. So as I say every time, all participants can unmute, which is with great power comes great responsibility. So please come off mute and speak with us and ask questions and share your comments. And please stay on mute when you are not speaking so that everybody can hear what's going on. We love to see your faces. If you have webcam availability and you feel comfortable sharing your camera, we really like to see everybody. Please, again, ask questions throughout. We will share materials afterwards like usual. No breakouts or polls or quizzes in this section. I think somebody's going to put the link to the slides in the chat. Okay, thanks. I see somebody, maybe me. No, Ami's got it. And then, of course, if you're having those AV issues, always try just going out and coming back. We'll be watching to admit people. If you're in and you're struggling and you're able to direct message me or one of the other team members, we'll try to figure out what's going on. All right. Next slide. So our agenda for today, we're in the process of our welcome and introductions. Then we're going to talk a lot about the FAFSA today. So the need for FAFSA in higher education, and then some updates, best practices, resources, time for questions, and of course, our regular closeout. So our objectives, that you all will understand the importance of higher education for students experiencing homelessness, that you'll learn about FAFSA process and procedures as they stand right now, learn some of those best practices for supporting transitions to adulthood, and gather some resources to assist you in supporting those transitions for students experiencing homelessness. So, I've been talking a lot. Again, Amanda Wilson, Youth Housing Initiative Director. I'm joined by my colleagues Ami Diallo and Evelyn Guerin, who are Youth Housing Initiative Specialists. We also have Susanna Whalen and Ashley Huser from ODE on with us, and then of course our wonderful presenters. So we have Jillian Sitar, Director of Higher Education Partnerships at Schoolhouse Connection, and Carlos Bing, Director of College Access Programs at the Ohio Department of Higher Education. So again, really excited to share all this content with you today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jillian.
Give me 1 second to pull up Jillian's slides. All right, go ahead, Jillian.
Hello, everyone. Awesome. We can skip this slide. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Amanda. And if you aren't familiar with Schoolhouse Connection, welcome. Schoolhouse Connection is a national organization based in Washington, D.C. And our mission is to overcome homelessness through education. And we do that from prenatal to post-secondary education. And we do this by providing strategic advocacy, both on the federal and state level, also do a lot of practical assistance, so trainings like this here today. And then you can learn a little bit more about us on our website here on that slide. Next slide here. Here's our agenda. Amanda already ran through this. Don't need to run through it again. We can get right into business. So I saw that we have a few folks here in the chat about some high school counselors, maybe some social work people here as well. So we just wanted to kind of do some ground level setting and talk through what the different roles and responsibilities are for high school counselors and students experiencing homelessness. Next slide. So pulled directly from, the McKinney-Vento Act, school counselors must advise students experiencing homelessness and help them prepare and improve their readiness for college, which is what we're doing here today. So we already got that one step off the list. This law also states that local liaisons and school counselors should ensure that all homeless high school students receive information and individualized counseling regarding college readiness, selection, application process, financial aid, and availability of campus supports. So this can look like a lot of different ways. On the next slide, I'm not going to read through all the different options. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, there, perfect. There's always a lag. But you can read through some of the ones that are here, and we'll talk a little bit more later in the presentation about specific strategies. But I do want to highlight just a few here. So one is being with credit recovery, especially if students have been bouncing around for multiple schools, multiple places. I know the pandemic has also had an impact for a lot of students with their schooling. Another thing I want to highlight is providing students with waivers for college entrance exams or application fees, because that can really start to add up if students are applying to multiple colleges. Also SAT and ACTs, there are also waivers for homeless students as well. So making sure that we're always asking these questions and making sure that students know of all the different options and aid that's available to them. And we'll talk a lot more in depth about FAFSA and partnering specifically with post-secondary institutions a little bit later. All right, next slide. So that kind of brings me here to the whole crux of the issue. Why are we vouching? What is the need for higher education? What is the importance of the FAFSA? What does this mean for our students experiencing homelessness? And on the next slide here, we talk through some of those pieces. So right now, there's kind of been an increasing skepticism about the value of higher education. More and more people aren't, thinking about it right after high school, as we've seen traditionally in the past, especially, with the rising cost of tuition, the economy, the pandemic. It's just not been as valued compared to what we've seen historically. But at Schoolhouse Connection, we believe that higher education is necessary for students to achieve financial independence and stability. And most good paying jobs are requiring some sort of post-secondary education. And this is kind of further backed by a 2019 study from Chapin Hall that found that higher education appears to be a protective factor against youth homelessness. So four-year college enrollment is nearly 4 times higher for young adults that have without experience of homelessness compared to their peers. But going to college costs money, and that's where financial aid comes in. So there was a new data report from Washington last year that was able to link financial aid and upward mobility. So all students coming from families with household incomes below $63,000 saw an economic status rise within 3 years of earning a degree and entering the labor force. So again, coming back full circle, going back to those good paying jobs with a college degree. All right, next slide. But filling out the FAFSA is important. That's how you're able to get access to federal and state aid, and financial aid can make a difference, as I just alluded to on the past slide. But we're seeing here that when students are completing the FAFSA, they have an increased likelihood to actually pursue a post-secondary education. So high school seniors who fill out FAFSA are 63% more likely to enroll in higher education. The higher amount of aid students receive, the higher likelihood that they will either transfer or graduate. So I know a lot of times students are a little bit wary of filling out financial aid. They might not understand the process, but we always want to encourage students to do so. More and more states are actually requiring policies that in order to graduate, students need to fill out the FAFSA. I don't believe Ohio is one of them, but more and more states are having that requirement there. All right, next slide here. And just to clarify, when we are talking about students experiencing homelessness when filling out the FAFSA, we're talking very specifically about unaccompanied homeless youth or unaccompanied youth who are also self-supporting and at risk of homelessness. So breaking it down on that little box here, you can kind of see the specific definitions of unaccompanied, of homeless, of self-supporting and at risk of homeless. So those are there all on the slide. These students, who I'm just going to collectively refer to as unaccompanied homeless youth, they are considered independent students, which means they do not need to include parental information on the FAFSA. But you might be thinking, well, what about our students that are also experiencing homelessness with their families? Aren't they still considered homeless? Technically, yes, they are homeless, but they are not homeless on the FAFSA. So we get a lot of confusion about that. They would still fill out the FAFSA just as everyone else would normally do. But when they get to that homeless question, because they are with their families, they would need to include parental information on the FAFSA. That's a little bit tricky. We get a lot of questions about that. So I'm happy to talk through those a little bit more if folks have questions, but just wanted to kind of set that stage. For homelessness on the FAFSA, we're talking about unaccompanied homeless youth or unaccompanied youth who are at risk of homeless and self-supporting. All right, next slide. We actually released a report. We do this typically every year that analyzes FAFSA data for homeless and foster youth. And we have data since 2013. And the results were pretty shocking. So if you want to read the report, you can scan the QR code there. I'm going to run through some of the findings really quick. One of them is that in the 2020-2021 academic year, the number of unaccompanied homeless youth FAFSA determinations declined by almost 10% from the prior year. The second finding is that for foster youth, it decreased by about 7%. And then the third finding is that the number of youth who requested a FAFSA determination but did not receive them increased by 23% the prior year and 34% from 2018. So there were more and more students that were requesting a determination because they thought they met the definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth, but those determinations weren't getting processed, or else we would have seen an increase. So what the reasons why they didn't receive that determination isn't unknown. It could have been maybe they met other eligibility requirements, maybe they went through the foster care route, or maybe the process was just really burdensome and they gave up. Maybe the students were getting bounced around from different places and they decided not to go to college at all. We know the pandemic has had a huge impact on all of these, but we do know is that more and more students think that they might meet this definition, they might be considered homeless, but the numbers aren't adding up to seeing the determinations actually happening. Next slide. So this graph shows unaccompanied homeless youth determinations made by school district liaisons from the different years. So what I really like about this line graph here is that in 2016, you can see the direct impact of policy, because that when FAFSA amendments went into effect in McKinney-Vento, that required liaisons to inform unaccompanied homeless youth about their independent student status and help them fill out the FAFSA. Once that happened, we saw a 13% increase, which is great. But then you see in 2019, they start going down, again, because of the pandemic and some of the issues I just discussed. But we're really hopeful that the new FAFSA numbers that we'll get soon will see a rebound as more and more students are coming back to college. Next slide. I pulled the Ohio specific numbers so you can see between the 2 different years. So for unaccompanied homeless youth, it went down by almost 14%, so higher than the national average. And then for foster youth, it went down by 8%. So again, a little bit higher than the national average of 7%. So just wanted to kind of show that for y'all in Ohio to kind of see what your numbers typically are. All right, next slide here. So I'm not sure if folks have heard, we can go to the next one as well. There are some big changes happening with the FAFSA for the 24-25 FAFSA that's coming out. And this is all from the FAFSA Simplification Act, which was passed in 2020. There was different phased implementation, including some new provisions specifically for homeless and foster youth that went into last year's FAFSA, the 23-24 FAFSA, that I'll go through some of those. But what was a little confusing last year was that the FAFSA went out on October 1st, and the guidance for these new provisions for homeless and foster youth went out in November and in April. So already when the FAFSA was out. So there was a lot of confusion last year because the questions looked the same as past years, but the new law went into effect, but it wasn't reflected. So hopefully for this year, we will not have those issues and we'll be able to move forward with these new provisions. Everything will make sense. But the one important thing to note is that there's actually going to be a delay for this year's FAFSA. So normally FAFSA is available starting October 1st. We believe it'll start in December. So this means that students have actually less time to fill out the FAFSA, but good news, we have more time to get our students prepared and ready and start talking to them about the FAFSA and making sure that folks get all the paperwork and things necessary to prepare. So once the FAFSA is available, we can hit the ground running. We actually released this new resource that I'm going to drop in the chat. We just released it yesterday that talks about, I'll put it once I have the slides up. But we talked through some different strategies to be proactive in helping students get all the things that they need before the FAFSA is available. All right, next slide. So to go back to what some of those key changes are for the homeless and foster youth, here are the 3 big ones that I really want to share with you. We have resources linked later if you want to read through everything. But the first one is that homeless and foster youth status does not need to be redetermined. So once an authorized entity provides a student with a determination saying you are a homeless youth, an unaccompanied homeless youth, that will then follow them for every single year that they are filling out the FAFSA. So before, a student would need to fill out the FAFSA and then also provide a new determination every single year, which was really re-traumatizing for students and honestly really time consuming. A lot of times students were like, yep, my situation still hasn't changed, but let me run around and try to get this letter from X, Y, and Z people. That's not happening anymore. This all gets streamlined. The second big change is that determinations must be made as quickly as practical. So this means that students experiencing homelessness should be prioritized with the FAFSA determinations, and we want to make sure that we are getting these students, these determinations, these letters as soon as possible. The third, and quite frankly, another huge change, is that more and more people can now provide determinations. School district liaisons or their designee, that's a new piece, can provide a determination. Directors or designees of a director of an emergency or transitional shelter, really any sort of program that helps individuals experiencing homelessness, can now write a letter. This means it doesn't need to be HUD or an RHYA funded program. Any program, any shelter can provide a letter now, which is huge. TRIO or Gear Up directors or the designee can now provide a determination. This is also a new entity. And then financial aid administrators, whether it is a financial aid administrator at the current institution the student is in, or at a previous institution that the financial aid administrator made a determination. So a lot more people, broader range of folks that typically our students are interacting with, which is great. We know these determinations can be burdensome and can be time consuming. So now more people can provide that letter. And again, if a student can't receive a determination from any of those people, the responsibility falls on the financial aid administrator to make that determination. It is now codified in the law. So it's no longer guidance. This is the law. Financial aid administrators must do it. All right, moving on. We're going to talk through some best practices here. Next slide. So some of these we kind of saw already on that previous slide, talking about the role of the school counselors, but these are more just general transition from high school best practices. We definitely want to start talking about college earlier than senior year. Honestly, as students come to high school, their freshman year, their first year, start talking about college, because the more frequently we're talking about it, the more invested the students are and can really, picture themselves pursuing that post-secondary education. Other pieces that are listed here, I want to highlight FAFSA mentors or graduation coaches. We've been seeing a lot of schools creating these roles from the ARP HCY money, from the COVID relief money that was passed a few years ago. So having these individuals that are dedicated to focus and help students experiencing homelessness plan out, what is their life after they graduate from high school. A lot of times we see students fall into the 3 big E's. So one, they're enrolling into a post-secondary education. Number 2, maybe they are enlisting into the military. Or 3, they're going straight into the workforce and getting employed. So that tends to be the 3 big E's we're seeing the graduation coaches doing, helping students pursue what they want to do once they graduate from high school. Some great other transitions is partnering with higher education professionals. So whether it is a homeless higher education liaison, so there might be someone on the college campus that mimics your role as a McKinney-Vento liaison, but on the post-secondary side. If you have that partnership already, that is huge. That is great. If that role doesn't exist, maybe you're partnering with another higher ed professional. Maybe it's someone within the financial aid office. Maybe there's a specific support program or the dean of students office. Just having someone to do that warm handoff from high school to college is absolutely critical. I had one student, one of our scholars a few years ago, say this quote, and it has stuck with me for years. She said that graduating from high school was the most devastating day of her life because she lost all the support system she had built throughout high school, those 4 years. She had a system, she had a network set in place. And then once she graduated, she didn't know anyone. She didn't feel any connection to her college. And that's where we see a lot of our students experience summer melt. They have every intention of going to college. They paid, to go, but then those 3 months, 2 to 3 months, they don't have any connection, and then they don't end up, coming to campus in the fall. So some schools have combat summer melt by creating summer bridge programs. So Florida State has an Unconquered Scholars program. It is dedicated for homeless and foster youth. And the Summer Bridge program brings students onto campus early. They're able to get acclimated to the campus. They're able to meet other peers. It's a really, really awesome program. Next slide for FAFSA best practices. Again, we want to make sure folks know what these new changes are happening to the FAFSA, since so many changes are happening for 24-25, making sure that folks are aware that it's not going to be available until December. Once the FAFSA is available, we have a great email template that you can just copy and paste and send to your students so they know exactly what they need to prepare and get ready. We also have a sample form letter. So again, if you are one of those authorized entities, you can just use this form and then send it to the student, send it to financial aid, and you're good to go. I already mentioned FAFSA mentors. Other pieces here, one thing I do want to say is that if you are working with students who are experiencing homelessness with their families, encourage that student to reach out to the financial aid office, because even though they aren't going to be marked as homeless on the FAFSA, there might be specific programs or resources that are available on the campus that they might be eligible for, or there might be some extra aid. So they aren't going to be showing up homeless on the FAFSA, but having that student just reach out and let them know, hey, I'm experiencing homelessness with my family. Is there any other extra support services, things that might be available that you can connect me with? Last piece here, scholarship opportunities. We have a great one, which we can go to the next slide within Schoolhouse Connection. It is available now. So for students who are attending college for the very first time, they can fill out this application. It is a $2,500 monetary scholarship, but the key piece is the peer mentorship program. We connect students with all across the country that are part of our program here. We have 10 every single year, which is great. We also have one-on-one case management support. We have 2 dedicated staff members that their whole role is to help support these students. And then we do 3 all expenses paid trip. So one, typically their senior year, we bring them together in Florida. They go to Universal Studios. It's a great time to celebrate them, get them hyped for college. Then the second trip, we bring them after their first year of college to DC, where they get to meet with congressional staffers. We meet with the Department of Education. They're able to share their experiences, which help, push for different federal and state advocacy efforts that we're working on. And then their third trip, we just started it this year. We bring them back in between their junior and senior year, and it is a life skills retreat. It was in North Carolina this year, but it's a great way for folks to start thinking about, what is life after college? How am I setting myself up for success? We do a lot of good work, preparing students for college, doing orientation. But now we're seeing more and more schools starting to do, all right, let's prepare you for life after college, for the real world. And that's what we're hoping to achieve in our third trip. Next slide. So I have about 4 minutes here, but I'm also curious to hear if you have any other strategies or anything that y'all are doing to better support your students, either homeless or foster youth, to fill out the FAFSA and prepare for higher education. As you put that in the slide, I can run through our next few slides that have some resources here. So, just some key takeaways. Again, start talking to students before their senior year. Large changes are happening to the FAFSA, but provisions for homeless and foster youth are in effect now. And then we want to ensure that we're continuously providing support for students as they transition from high school, and hopefully providing a warm handoff, whether it is to a higher ed professional, someone within the employment, or if they are enlisted in the military, just making sure that the student has another supportive adult, that once they leave your high school, they have someone else in their corner to back them up. I think our next slide might have more resources. Maybe there's one more after this. Yep, perfect. So you'll get a copy of this PowerPoint here. We have our great higher ed page that has all our higher ed resources. We have tip sheets for homeless higher education liaisons, tip sheets for colleges and universities that have best practices for supporting students. We have our FAFSA page that has all the things, including the resource I just mentioned, the 24-25 FAFSA delayed, what you need to know, which I'll put here in the chat. The FAFSA simplification one-pager that talks through all the changes for homeless and foster youth. The sample form, we just updated it for the new 24-25 FAFSA. And then this video link here, the new federal FAFSA guidance for homeless youth. We did an awesome webinar earlier this spring with the Department of Education. So this is directly from the Department of Education talking through, what the FAFSA provisions are for homeless and foster youth, what this means. It was one of our largest webinars we've had. I think we had over 3,000 people sign up for this webinar. We had to keep bumping up our Zoom because so many people wanted to hear what was going on. So definitely recommend that resource. And if you are a higher ed professional, sharing that with your financial aid administrator as well. So I'm going to pause to see if folks have any specific questions or any strategies they want to share before I turn it over to Carlos to talk through some of our specific Ohio pieces. And I'll be around in I can send my email here if people have specific questions. I know that the FAFSA can get wonky. So if you want to talk through, feel free to shoot me an email. But thank you again for having me, and I'll send it to Carlos.
Thank you, Jillian. Good afternoon, everyone. I think they're going to bring my slides up here in just a moment. Carlos Bing with the Department of Higher Education. I told the folks when we were prepping, they're going to have to shut me up because I love talking about FAFSA. So I'm going to give you all a lot of information based on what we're hearing as it relates to the free application for federal student aid and things that are happening in Ohio that will hopefully help to provide you some resources as you're working with the students that you all work with. With Jillian's presentation, there were a few things that I wanted to add as it relates to things that she was sharing with you all that relate to FAFSA. One being that she mentioned that there are states that make FAFSA completion mandatory. That is not the case in Ohio currently, where in some states, every high school senior has to complete the FAFSA before graduating. In Ohio, that is not the case currently. We did attempt to put that in, to make that law in Ohio twice. And in both times that was turned down. And, you know, on a personal level, to me, I think it's very important to hopefully one day get to that point where FAFSA completion is required, because what's happening currently in the state and in most states, in all states, is we have three groups of students. One group of students is those students who know about the FAFSA and they complete the FAFSA. The second group is students that know about the FAFSA and decide not to complete it. And then the third group is students who have no idea that the FAFSA exists, right? So if we made this a mandatory requirement, then what it would do is reduce that group from three groups to two groups, where you would have students who knew and decided to complete it, and those who knew and could decline to not do the FAFSA. And so hopefully in time that becomes a law in Ohio, but currently that is not the case. The other thing that Julian mentioned is that, yes, the upcoming FAFSA will be delayed. The timeline is sometime in December. We're hoping it'll be released. Law says that it has to be released before December 31st. So hopefully it won't be on New Year's Day that you all are getting notification the FAFSA is out, and hopefully it's closer to December 1st. But we don't know what day it will be in December. However, preparation is key. And one of the things that folks can begin doing even right now is having students and those that are going to be contributors on that student's FAFSA to complete a FSA ID. I would recommend having students do that ASAP because one of the things that we're a little nervous about is when the FAFSA does release in December, we're not sure what's going to happen with the system and how it's going to be able to deal with all the congestion at one time. And so if you have students completing a FAFSA in addition to trying to get an FSA ID created, that can create some issues. And so we're encouraging as many students as possible to create those FSA IDs now, so that when the FAFSA opens, you already have that step done and you can begin the FAFSA completion process. The third update that I'll share before I dive into the presentation is there's a lot of information that's coming out as it relates to what the new FAFSA will look like and what tools are going to be available. The National College Attainment Network, NCAN, available at ncan.org. They have free trainings that are available to members and non-members, which this is new. Typically, NCAN will only provide trainings to their members, but because this issue is so big with the FAFSA changes, they're providing training for members and non-members. And so if you go to ncan.org, hover over to the FAFSA bar, NCAN, I'll put it in chat here, ncan.org. You go to ncan.org, hover over FAFSA, and then there's a link that says Better FAFSA. If you click on there, that'll show you the links that are available for the trainings, and they're free, but that are preparing folks as the new FAFSA comes online. So if that's of interest to you, I would highly encourage you to take a look at that. As it relates to Ohio, we have a number of resources that are available at the Department of Higher Education as it relates to FAFSA. And so I'm going to drop a link in the chat that will take you to our FAFSA hub. And if you can either get there by using the link that I'm going to put in the chat, or you can use the nice little QR code that we have there on the screen. But once you get to the FAFSA Hub, it provides a ton of information as it relates to FAFSA completion, not only for students, but also for parents and for counselors. We know that in order to get the form completed, it's going to require the support of not only students and parents, but those in the field that can help them, the students, navigate through the process. One of the things that's really neat about the new FAFSA is that it doesn't necessarily require those who complete it to bring their W-2 information and input it into the system. It's encouraged you still. It's important to still bring the documentation, but you don't have to plug the information into the system because the USDOE will be able to automatically bring that tax information into the system when students complete the FAFSA. And so that makes it a little less stressful and a little less information sharing that's happened in the past. That doesn't have to happen as much going forward because that information already comes across when students complete the FAFSA. So on our site, again, there's tools for students, there's tools for parents, there's toolkits. There are a number of different checklists that are available. There's also deadline. There's a list that shows all the deadlines in terms of campus deadlines. Those differ based on institution as it relates to when they would like to see that FAFSA done. And so we have a link on that site that provides that information. There's also links there to take you directly to the FAFSA page, the opening page. It takes you directly to the place where you can start that FSA ID process, along with a number of different resources, a calendar of events if you're looking at ways to sort of get your students excited about completing a FAFSA. Because let's be honest, folks, the FAFSA form isn't very exciting. It's not something that folks look forward to completing, but it is so incredibly important to get done. And so our site provides information that can make it a little more fun. If FAFSA can be fun, we attempt to do that. And so that it's a great place to come and get information there. The other resource that we have on our website is we're running a campaign. The campaign is called 3 to Get Ready, 4 to Go. And what we ask is for district personnel, folks at the high schools, to register to be a part of the campaign. And with your registration, we'll send you trinkets that you can use to excite and motivate your students to complete a FAFSA, along with a college application. And so these trinkets can help to push those numbers up. And so again, you can go to our website to register for that. We can go to the next slide. So one of the things I wanted to talk about here, and one of the things that's really important, and there's a lot of energy, Jillian, you mentioned this earlier, there's energy around this idea that college isn't worth it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But, when we talk about FAFSA and FAFSA completion, we're not just talking about the 4-year publics, the 4-year privates, or the 2-year community colleges. We're also talking about students that attend Ohio technical centers, where you can go and earn a certificate. And there are programs that are at those Ohio technical centers that are eligible for federal and state aid. And so by completing that FAFSA, students can reduce their cost if they decide to enroll in those programs. So again, there's a lot of energy around college not being worth it. And there's some energy around this concept that, you have your 4 years and your 2 years, and some separation with that type of education versus the education you can get from a technical center, from an Ohio Technical Center, where you can earn a certificate. What I would encourage you all to push is for students to look for an opportunity after high school that looks at earning a degree or a certificate, or going to the military, or going direct workforce. What we're pushing here at the Department of Higher Education is for students to look at all 3 of those options, but primarily we push higher education, which includes 4-year, 2-year, and education at the Ohio Technical Centers. And so wanted to make sure that we shared that here because they all accept funding from the FAFSA when those are completed. We can go to the next slide here. And so this slide here talks about the lifetime earnings potential. I always say to students that I work with, you know, there are no guarantees in life. There are absolutely no guarantees in life. But statistically, we know that if a student earns a degree or certificate, they have a better chance of earning a higher income. It doesn't guarantee higher income, but it gives you a better chance. There are individuals that we know that didn't go to college or didn't earn a degree or certificate that are doing quite well financially, but that's not the large segment of individuals. And so to give students the best chance to find success income-wise, it makes sense to encourage students to look at higher education because again, lifetime earnings say, or this slide says that the more that you learn, the more that you potentially can earn. We can go back to the next slide here. And I want to talk about a few additional resources that are available for stakeholders. And so for individuals that are working with students directly at a high school, you may be wondering, how many students in my high school have completed a FAFSA? And there's a website that can tell you that information. I will drop that link in the chat now. FSA has a way for individuals to find out how many students in the building have completed a FAFSA. And this is valuable information. The state of Ohio also has a resource where you can actually find out by name who has completed the FAFSA. This information is available through the Ohio FAFSA data service on the OhioFAFSA .org website, which I'll drop that website here for you all in the chat. And so once a superintendent gets access to this system, they can designate staff members, including school counselors, access to be able to see by name which students have completed the FAFSA. And so this is a great resource, particularly for individuals who may run into a student who says, hey, I've completed my FAFSA, it's done. You can check this resource to ensure that the student has completed the FAFSA. And it even provides some error codes. So if a student maybe has run into an issue with completing their FAFSA and there's an error code that comes up, this system can share the error code information and then give you some steps in order to remove those error codes. So very, very helpful resource there. And then finally, Ohio Reach, a wonderful partner that we work with here at the Department of Higher Education through the Ohio Children's Alliance. Ohio Reach has a number of resources that are available to assist students who are dealing with homelessness, that are going into institutions of higher education. And some of those resources include scholarship opportunities, emergency fund assistance, for things as simple as if a student maybe they need a vehicle repaired. We know that some students stop out of college for bills as small as $250 or less. And so if a student is eligible, they can request emergency fund assistance through Ohio Reach to take care of some of those expenses. There's also a resource page where they have a ton of resources that are available to students. But what I'm most excited about, if we go to the next slide, is this Ohio Reach post-secondary designation. You know, when COVID hit, I don't know if you all remember this, but when COVID hit, campuses shut down. And so for a lot of students that were on campuses, when the campuses shut down, they simply went home. But for a lot of our students who are former foster youth or who were formerly homeless, they didn't have anywhere to go. And there wasn't a lot of guidance given to those students to be able to figure out, what do I do next? And so at our department, at the Department of Higher Education, we began thinking about a number of ways to assist students that found themselves in that situation. And so that led us to begin thinking about this idea, this Ohio Reach post-secondary designation that we now have. And what the designation does is it identifies institutions that are friendly to students who need support in these spaces. They have a designated person that students can go to get supports if they're looking for assistance in these spaces. And so we're going to be releasing a press release very soon. I'm trying to be careful what I say because I can't say which institutions have met the designation just yet, but I will tell y'all there are 28 institutions in Ohio who have earned this designation. And by having this designation, what it means is they have a contact person on the campus that students can reach out directly to, and they have really good support services that are available for students. We will soon be posting this information on our website and on the Ohio Reach website. And so we want you to continue to look at our website at the Department of Higher Education page, as well as the Ohio Reach page, to be able to see which campuses are part of the Ohio Reach post-secondary designation that have a contact specifically for students that they can reach out to get services from. Those are my updates. And so I will stop there and see if there are any questions.
You want to come off mute and do your question, Jillian?
Carlos, I just was curious if for the contact, is it specifically for foster or is it for homeless as well?
Great question, Jillian. It's for both. It's for both.
That's great to hear. That's awesome. I'm gonna also share, we have a page specific for homeless higher education liaison. So once that is available, we'd love to add Ohio's contact information there. There's about 10 states that have policies for homeless higher education liaison. So I'm glad we can add Ohio to that list.
Absolutely. We will make sure to get that information to you. You know, one of the difficulties that we have in state, and this isn't just an Ohio thing, it's across all states, is that it's difficult for some students. They don't want to be labeled. And so we want to be able to provide the services, but we can't go out and market in a particular way. And we're trying to figure out how to better get the information out. But as you work with students, if you can advocate that they advocate for themselves and let us know so that we know how we can help them, that would be incredibly important and helpful for us, because we don't know unless they tell us that they need the support. So I wanted to make sure I shared that.
Thank you. It looks like we had another question in the chat from Christina. It says, what are your recommendations for students without documentation? Christina, can you clarify, like, do you mean like identifying documents? I'm
referring to students like without social security numbers, whom the FAFSA might affect their status or endanger them.
Is it because they are undocumented students, or because they like don't know what their social security number is and need to go?
Because they're undocumented.
Okay, yeah. Does Ohio have a state FAFSA that's Ohio specific? I know like California has the CADA, but just...
Yeah, unfortunately, in Ohio, we do not have a separate form. I think like California and Texas, they have separate forms and we just don't. And so there are students that are incredibly terrified to complete the FAFSA because they feel that it can put their information out there and put them in danger. And so we don't have a separate form in Ohio currently. I know the feds are coming up with some language around that, but I don't have any updates on what that looks like currently.
And so do you like intend to continue like pursuing requiring that for graduation when that would like prevent students from graduating?
No, great question, Christina. So in that instance, what would happen is there would be two options. So even though the FAFSA would be a graduation requirement, a student can either complete the FAFSA or they can decline completion. And they don't have to give a reason for declining it. They can just say, I opt not to complete it. And that's totally fine. Student in that instance could still graduate from high school. Great question.
Yeah, I wish we had, I'm trying to think if we have any additional resources around, you know, supporting higher education for undocumented students. And I think it's just, it's a space for advocacy, and it's a space for us to be on top of what is happening with policy, you know, because it change, you know, just like we learned with all these FAFSA changes, like it changes. So the federal, like Carlos was saying, there could be federal opportunities or protections, but we know that the attitude can change federally depending on what's happening with the political scene. So yeah, I think it's just something that we as folks interested in supporting higher education for homeless students, including undocumented students, to just continue to share, ask questions, and work with one another as we try to figure out what those supports are to help those students get higher education without being put at risk. So sorry, that's not a great answer, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we, you know, that's important, and I'm glad you're talking about it.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
We've got some time. Other questions, comments, things people want to ask or share? Got a quiet group today. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to both of our presenters today. Just really amazing information, super helpful. I know, oh, sorry about my strobing. My webcam does this sometimes to embarrass me. But I know people process in different ways. So I know people will be taking it in. So we definitely, you know, folks have shared their contact information. And of course, the COHHIO team is here for you to make sure that you get your questions answered. So if you are attending this, but you aren't on our mailing list, we definitely want you to be able to sign up for that. And then, we also welcome feedback, always feedback, any kind of feedback. We like to hear about how these sessions are designed to be a productive use of your very precious time. So it is incredibly helpful for us to hear how things are going. If you have even a few moments to fill out the Google form and let us know, or shoot us an email or anything else to just let us know how we're doing and how we can best support the work you all are doing in the communities. I think that's all I have. Anybody on our team or from our presenters, any final thoughts, anything I missed, or anybody wanted to share with the group?
Yeah, I'd just like to weigh in and thank you both for joining us. It's always exciting to engage in this space. And I love the comment, Jillian, about let's start talking about this early with our high school students, because a lot of times we see that they give up because their family life doesn't look the same as their peers always. So I encourage everyone on this call to just keep doing what you're doing, encourage our youth. Carlos, when can we expect that list of universities that will be having that single point of contact? Do you have an idea?
You know, Susan, I'm thinking maybe within the next week or two.
Oh, okay, soon.
It's going to be very soon. Like, we've been working on this for several months now. We've already interviewed institutions and we know who they are. We're just waiting for the press release to drop. So within the next week or two.
Okay.
And I'll be sure to share that with you and with Julian and get that information out to you all.
Okay, that's awesome. We're in the process of doing updates to our website, so we'll definitely have some new things to add after today. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, with that.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And our next session will be November 15th, right? November 15th, and hope to see you all there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we can stick around for a couple of minutes. So if anybody has any last minute questions or anything, you know, my team and I can hang out for a few minutes. But with that, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll be in touch soon with more information.
Yes. And the feedback link is in the chat.
Yes, please and thank you.
Thank you.
Ami, do you want to stop recording?
Thank you for telling me that.
You got to it before I did, Evelyn.